Paul Little King, and I'm super stoked to be here. I know we call this thing like Heaven's Gate. No, I'm just kidding. Oh. Heaven's Reset.
Where's the Kool-Aid?
I actually did an AI video of me there. The chart thing, like, you guys should think about drinking that. It wasn't Kool-Aid, by the way. It was flavoring. There was also some other heavenly gates here in LA a while back. But I'm here to talk about the big Saturn Neptune conjunction and how it's not just about that, which is a very powerful conjunction that we just had just 2 days ago. There was a rarity to it, but also it's at the end of the conjunctional astrology we've been through since 2020, which ironically, I was here 6 years ago being like, welcome everyone, this will be a fun ride. And what do we do at the end of this conjunctional astrology? And then we get some amazing patterns that I know it's sometimes hard for, especially somebody like me who likes to really be like, no, this is gonna actually happen. But there's a lot of positive here. And I know it doesn't look like that sometimes, but I really want to connect these cycles and show people a different perspective than I think that's kind of out there. Of course, it might scare you, but it's here to remind you it's not going to go that way. So, we just had Saturn Neptune. Oh, that's the wrong one. That one's gross. It's got an accident thing. Here we are. This is a lot nicer. I've been in Taurus. There we go. So Saturn Neptune just 2 days ago, that 36, 37-year cycle. The last one was in Capricorn at 10 degrees. We just had it at 0 degrees Aries. The last time that Saturn Neptune met at 0 Aries was 4361 BC. So it's been over 6,000 years ago. We've seen it at the beginning of the zodiac. And what a way to end 6 years of major conjunctions. And I'll show you that understanding of conjunctional astrology that was used back in the 14th century. But we started off 2020 with this big Saturn-Pluto, the Jupiter-Pluto thrice. The last time that Jupiter and Pluto had met 3 times was back when Jupiter and Pluto met in Leo in the 50s. That was the beginning of like, oh, get on a nice suit and get on an airplane. And then you saw in Capricorn the last 6 years, airplanes flipping upside down and people dressing in furry bunny suits to get on a plane. Jupiter, Saturn, of course. There's actually a lot more, whether it was Jupiter, Uranus, Jupiter, Neptune. It has been a non-stop power punch of energy, and also when you have all the planets all on one side of the zodiac meeting up, there's a lot of space in the chart. There's a lot of this energy where's things going? This Michael Erlewine actually taught me a lot about helioastrology over the last 15 years, and the space in a chart, whether it's the helio or the geo, there's an eagerness, there's this also angst though, there's an anxiety in the energy, because it's so consolidated. It feels like there's no space. It's like we're in a tin can. Actually, I think of Star Wars, ironically enough, like episode 4, the first one, when they're all being smashed in the trash compactor. When all these big conjunctions happen and they're all next to each other, all these planets, there's no room, but you look around, you're like, look at all the room in the space. I mean, you got the sky, there's all this room. No, there's no room. This is the beginning moment of things starting to break apart. And the last time that we saw all these big conjunctions happen, 1345, was when the astrologer saw it and told the Pope, hey, shit's about to go down, bro. Okay, I'm gonna go run to France because I'm a French Pope, and I'm gonna have 2 fires next to me, and I won't tell anybody about it, and we'll just see what happens in the world. So of course, Saturn and Neptune alone, the final part of this conjunctional astrology, but a big transit on its own. At 0 Aries. Now 0 Aries, we all in our astrology draconic charts have the North Node at 0 Aries. If you just move your chart wherever your North Node is, and you just keep the same distance between the planets and the North Node, you just move that North Node and put it to 0 Aries. We all have a draconic chart. Now some astrologers use them. I like to use them, especially when it's more interesting like this. Like we all have Saturn, Neptune on our draconic North Nodes. It's an equalizer. That's what I like about the draconic chart for a collective understanding. And that's what zero Aries is. It's an equalizer. We're all in a reality, we're all in a universe, we're all in a place where there's this moment, where there's this spring of life that comes that defines not necessarily where it all goes, but the beginning of defining and understanding, hey, I'm here. What is this? And also, though, there is an empowerment place that comes here of what brings the spring. Of course, that's where the equinox is, and it's where the light takes on more day than night. So for Saturn and Neptune to be here back in 1989 when we had it last in Capricorn is very different. Saturn's, of course, the ruler of Capricorn. Saturn's at fallen Aries. Because this is where the light is greater. Saturn loves to rule down at the bottom of the chart of Capricorn and Aquarius, where it's cold. Aries doesn't like the cold. Unless there's a hot, energy wanting to connect. To keep it, that they want to keep it warm. Neptune, on the other hand, has been the very weird part of all this. We saw Neptune at the end of Pisces. It's been the ruler there. It's been there since the beginning of 2011, and then of course these two planets spent the whole entire since Saturn ingressed in 2023 in March, going together and not conjuncting. And the crazy part, then going into Aries last year and then not conjuncting, and then retrograding back into Pisces and not conjuncting, and then coming back into Aries just 2 days ago, and finally conjuncting. That is the longest you could ever have Saturn and Neptune be together since 4361 BC. So when you think about the history of 4361 BC, there's not a lot. It's prehistoric history. I've said it a lot, but the only history that comes up is, well, that's where we started to see migrations of humans on the planet. Like, I guess these people kind of started to migrate over here in this continent. There's some traces of people doing this over here, and then there's this one guy who has gold everywhere, and he's the only guy in the world who's just littered in gold. Gold teeth, gold everything, and it's like there's no gold mines by him. It's over where the war in Ukraine is happening right now. And it's like kind of weird because this guy just was like the same age, but just one dude littered in gold by himself. So I can't be the historian here and say, I know exactly what happened. But to me, it's almost like there's some force that comes in, whether it's an alien, whether it's humans themselves, that said, go figure out where you're at and go explore this new definitional place of what you all are. And I think when it comes to the core roots of where we're at for humanity's sake, that ties in a lot of what we're going to be going into this year and into next year with this Pluto trine Uranus that's coming up, or Uranus trine Pluto technically, and these amazing outer planet configurations that really have never been seen before. It's like, what is humanity? I don't think that even humans were even actually questioning themselves, like, am I a human being 400 years ago? I think we were worried about survival, we were worried about getting through. But even when it comes to Neptune, which actually does rule a lot of spiritual philosophy, you can't, I don't like to attach it to religion, that's just much more of a Jupiter place, but Jupiter does co-rule Pisces, but a lot of the stuff that this transit brings up is before the religions that are out there today. And I think that when you look at where we're at after the last 6 years, people are at a place where what's being dissolved is what's restricting us individually and collectively, allowing things to be defined without it being defined by all these other structures. Because Saturn loves to just have a structure and control. That's the negative and positive part. We want people that are responsible in our life. Trust me, you don't want to be with a partner that has zero responsibility. They don't show up in a relationship or something like that. But with Saturn, you can go too far. So when Saturn conjuncts Pluto, like we saw in 2020, in Capricorn, it goes too far. But what's happened now is the dissolving nature of this moment has brought us to where it's the entrance into the greatest astrology that you could see. And I know that I think people feel that deep down. But always, I think one of the lessons I've learned as an astrologer is it always is when you start seeing good things, on the horizon. It's like you gotta get through the things that were just not working first. It's very 12th house, and if we think about Saturn Neptune, that spent a majority of their time together in Pisces. There's been a lot of this exposing. I mean, Nostradamus always used Saturn and Pisces as just the disclosure of like true things that were secrets or things that actually were corrupt. Like the old astrologers looked at like if Pisces was in the negative, it was about corruption. And I think what we've all noticed is the corruption first in ourselves. Where are we not being authentic in who we are? Aries doesn't allow you to be inauthentic. You have to be authentic. The ego can, of course, kind of get lost. Neptune and Aries. I mean, the South back last time we saw Neptune cross in this place in Aries was very, very, very adamant that they were the chosen people to make the slaves live the life that they wanted to live, which is kind of crazy. There's going to be a lot more of that, but you know, people kind of like spiritually and religiously kind of, I'm here to do this for these people, and we know better. But I think this is different with Saturn. It's dissolving, you know, anybody that's going to try and control others is not going to work. Try and control an Aries ain't going to happen. That's Mars's house. That's where Mars sits. And I think that this is an interesting moment that Mars has come into view, whether everybody's talking about going to Mars, whether you want to use 3i Atlas, that was like, hey, I'm going to go right next to Mars and go cross over it. Mars is the place that's like being highlighted, which is so different. We've been in this outer planet, massive energy, and we're going to continue to be. But it's interesting that this inner planet stuff is being very aligned with Mars. And it's like, we have to now set a course. When I think of all the corruption just in the last couple of weeks we've seen coming out, and that's just the surface of the Epstein stuff, or anything else, you really start to think about people that were in control, structures that had certain things aligned, and what we're seeing in our own governments, right? They're at a place now to where you can't deny, right? You can't, that's a hard part about Neptune. Oh, and you know what? No, they're the love of my life, even though they're doing this, and you're just like, I'm gonna sweep that under the rug. How long can you do that for? How long can you, you know, be on cocaine until you're finally like, well, I can't breathe out of my nose. Neptune's the hardest planet in my opinion. I'll take Pluto any day. At least Pluto will scare the fuck out of you. Neptune will scare you once you're so far out. As Aleister Crowley always said, that's the fortress, or sorry, the fortress is the sun and the outpost is Neptune. Because it has its back to the sun and it's got its imagination far out, but it's also sensing what's out there in the universe. Saturn in many ways is like really focused within, and it's got its back to the outer planets. It's looking at, I want to control these little planets in front of me. I want to look at that Earth, how perfect it could be. But in Aries, that game goes away because Saturn hates to be in Aries. You'd actually think, because when Mars goes into Capricorn, Mars is just exalted there, right? You're like, you'd think that using essential dignities that, you know, Aries would be a great place for Saturn, but if you think about it, try getting a warrior man who's pumped full of testosterone, ready to go charge the field, like, and have him stop. Right? Saturn's gonna be like, no, wait for my signal. Yeah, right. Or when it comes to the plans that Saturn likes to make in Capricorn, or control plans like 2020, what I've been telling people is people not to worry about this time, because all the plans that everybody in these forces that have had, from all political specters to, it doesn't matter, just people who are bad people. I think we need to get rid of these labels, because I think part of Saturn Neptune is like, we need to re-come up with our mnemonic language, right? What is the number one way we speak now? Memes, emojis. It's actually it's literally my cousin who is the person who is doing the work about mnemonic language, and does the Himalayan language project. And he's learned through all the ancient cultures that it's when they start turning to mnemonic language, that their consciousness rises. So when we're writing in like normal, like what we think is English writing or just regular words, we're pretty low on the consciousness chain. I mean, if you think about ancient structures, right, like they all have hieroglyphics. And so I think it's an interesting moment that the labels, because Aries likes to label something, and there's nothing negative with that, right? Like if you don't know your noun, like, what's your name? What's your job? What do you like? It reminds me of the Mad Lib books. If you don't know how to fill in the blank, that's a really weird book with a really weird dude with, of course, red hair with some buck teeth. Very Mars. And I think that this is about this new, we call it a new earth, but it's really about like, are we going to be labeling people by their political stuff? Saturn has a lot to do with it, because it was all the beginning of this whole conjunctional astrology in Capricorn. And so it's almost like we all got sucked up into the last 6 years of all these crazy changes based off politics. But really, it's not about that. This all has to be redefined. This all has a better way to define it too, by a different way that we use that language. And also just a different way that we can approach now things in the world. Like this is a moment for us to find that. To me, it's always about what ignites us in Aries. It's the spark, it's the engine turning on. There's nothing better than sitting into the car, the sick-ass motor, and just turning it on, getting it going. But with Neptune and Saturn there's a little bit of a pause here, like, okay, do I use this motor? Do I go intense with it? Do I not? That's kind of the weird part of Saturn Neptune. Saturn wants to kind of chill out and make sure we have the plan, and Neptune's got the great dream, but also remembers the past of every time it pushed the gas, it blew off the side of the road. But I don't think we have much to worry about here. I think we have to come together and understand that there is this more redefining nature by it. Now, we were in the balsamic phase of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction from the prior one, and it was in Pisces. That's the most rough balsamic phase you could be. If you don't know what a balsamic phase is, it's when, especially in the lunar cycle, it's the 30 degrees prior to, it's the dark moon we call it. It's right before the new moon, the balsamic phase. You can look it up on anything. But planets do balsamic phases too. So if you go through this 36.5-year cycle we were just in, these last couple of years was literally the closing out of the last Saturn Neptune. And they happened in Capricorn. So if you think about, people put all their like praise, I guess, without even realizing it, they're very Neptune, into corporations. Like if you look at how corporations took over food, corporations took over everything since 1989. Corporations were kind of like a thing that were Nixon lovers, and it wasn't like, I remember, I'm young enough at least to grow up in the 80s and have, be like, okay, the only corps I remember were like McDonald's, like some fast food, that was like it. Like it wasn't like everything was a corporate thing, No, I used to go to the videotape store called Video Empire with the Asian guy, you know what I mean? Like he was super cool. And I remember he let me go in the 18 and over place at lunch too. Really young too. I'd be like, hey, can I go back there? But like, corporations hadn't fully like had a grip or taken over everything yet. What did you see during this last 2 years of Saturn, Neptune, Pisces? As people start going, fuck this. I'm done with that. Look at what these people are doing. And then when you think about the Epstein stuff, and then you think about the corporate government connection, right? Which is truly fascism in just one form of what you would want to call it. But, we've all been stripped of what we do and what we can be by these forces that try to control us and that really are not out for the better interest of us. Whether it's food, whether it's childcare. Jeez. I'm not going to waste my time and go too deep on that, but the ugly stuff comes out in Pisces, and it's only because unconsciousness has to be seen in order to become conscious. the bottom of our feet can smell really bad, or they could be your biggest fantasy. It just depends on who you are. I mean, I saw a thing the other day, some wife was having trouble, or her husband lost her job, and she started selling pictures of her feet online to carry the family out. I don't know if you guys all saw that recently. And I was thinking, like, that's kind of an interesting, thing here. People have fascination at the bottom of your feet. But then others, it's kind of like, get those. You got some jam between those toes. And that's what's the interesting part is the feet, right? Pisces, it's the only part of our body that's actually not the bottom part of our soles of our feet. They're on the ground. So they don't actually see above. And so whatever comes out, and we all go through it, we all go through 12th house stuff. And when we're in the collective and we're going through Pisces stuff, it's gonna be ugly that comes up. It's subconscious, stuff that we weren't paying attention to that has to, Pisces always finds a way to bring it up. And so this balsamic phase is brought up a lot. Aries is like, yeah, let's cut that out and let's do it different. Let's actually keep it simple too. What I love about Aries is it's simple. It doesn't want complication. And we've been in a very complicated state. When you have all these transits that have been affecting us, and then you add Pluto and Aquarius now, everything seems super complicated. But I think that's kind of the misnomer. I think that we're in a phase where it's like, get rid of the complication and take the simple path here. So if we just think, and there's a lot more conjunctions here, but when we think about the path which began January 20th, 2020, and that Saturn-Pluto conjunction at 22 degrees of Capricorn. It was interesting when 3i Atlas came out, and I just really got crazy with my AI, and I was just like, let's go see where 3i Atlas was once we got the trajectory, once we got the data. I'm like, where was it on that date? It was exactly at 22 degrees of Capricorn. So there was actually another hidden element. If Michael Luton was around for this, though, he would be like so happy. He would have been very happy to hear that. Because he knew. He tried to tell people for many years, every time the moon's occulting Saturn and Pluto, secret meetings are taking place. And I remember him doing that 2018, 2019, and then him increasing it by the time we got to that. And him and I had many talks about that, and he's like, and he always knew there was something else behind that. And it's kind of interesting that there was. But what's interesting is then we had Jupiter-Pluto 3 times in Capricorn, then you went to Jupiter-Saturn, which was a very unique one, of course. It happened at 0 Aquarius. So there's a lot of these big conjunctions that Jupiter-Saturn, of course, is every 20 years. But this broke the cycle from the 1961 that happened at the end of Capricorn. It actually moved into Aquarius. So what I'm going to kind of display here is that there's this uniqueness where things are very close, but the difference that I'm going to show you here is that it's the difference between a couple degrees here and there, but it's by sign. How important cusps really are, and how they change the whole foundation of everything. The fact that we got Jupiter-Saturn at 0 Aquarius, it's not the repeat of JFK getting assassinated and dying. It's not the repeat cycle of that whole Jupiter-Saturn cycle. Because the last one was in Capricorn that happened. Or a good example will be the Saturn and Neptune at 0 Aries. Like, I've seen a lot of the charts, and they're like, we didn't get them in Pisces. We got them in Aries, thank God, at 0 degree. But the big one will be thinking about how is this related to the 1345 prediction that led to the triple conjunction that led to the Black Death. Now, I'm not saying we're going to go through a Black Death. If anything, we kind of already went through our challenge of that. But back then, it was Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the triple conjunction in Aquarius. That, of course, there was eclipses, but then it was watching, oh my gosh, look at all these planets that are about to conjunct. That's back then a very popular form of astrology, of conjunctional astrology, was like, a bunch of planets are coming together, they're gonna conjunct, shit's going down. There's not a lot of writings, except there are, 1345 is a long time ago, but there is enough that the Pope received this information, and he was a French Pope. So you have to remember, The Holy Wars had ended at the end of the 1280s, 1284. That was an interesting time period because you think back to Saturn-Pluto cycles. We had the one in 2020, we had a Saturn-Pluto back 1517 with Martin Luther, and then you go back to 1284, Saturn-Pluto in Capricorn. So it's kind of an interesting point because it's like the Holy Wars end, and then they try to actually strip astrology away from being put in new cathedrals as we step into the 14th century. People start really questioning astrology in a negative light because of the church and what the Templars were using, and there were so many the end of medieval astrology in temples, especially like Christian ones, end at that period. And I think it's an interesting point because like the Pope is using an astrologer to predict things still, but not to the people. So it's 3 years later, after the triple conjunction, we see the beginning of the Black Death already had spread throughout most of Europe on its way 1349, 1350, going up towards Russia, as we know today, and take over that whole entire part, and over half the world passed away. Now, this is where I'm going to show a couple of the glitches we're going through that are really cool. So like back in 1345, it's Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Aquarius. For us, it was Jupiter, Saturn at 0 Aquarius, but right before, it was Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto in Capricorn, all within less than 10-degree orb. But the fact that there was this Aquarius, Capricorn cusp that separated them saved us in many ways. Believe it or not, you would think it would be Capricorn that would ruin the whole fucking game. Aquarius that usually does kind of throw everything on its head. The Saturn Neptune Aries that we're at right now, it hasn't happened since 4,361 BC. We don't have much that we can use as astrologers of this historical. It's prehistoric history here. And that prehistoric history is more about like the beginnings of what we define our humanity today. Of course, I can get Billy Carson in here or somebody out there in the world and try and go, well, no, we can use this tablet, or we can use this 12,000 years ago, or we can go to Peru and find this. And it's like, yeah, I get that. But we got to look at that 4361 period, and it's right before Babylon. It's right before all that stuff. So there's kind of like this blank. God, I guess I could think of it like a game or something. It's kind of like these blank humans that are just sitting in this game, this board game called Earth, just like, what do we do? And there's a little bit of that right now in the consciousness, like, what do we do next? I mean, people are frozen, they're eating fucking babies. What do we do? Right? Like, there's a lot of really weird shit going on, but it's like, where's the warrior within us? And a warrior is not about how we go fight and kill people. You know, a true Aries warrior is about defining the things and then finding ways to actually be there. One thing I like about Saturn, why it falls in Aries, is because Saturn restricts itself a lot. It wants to keep everything together and safe. And in Aries it goes, there's a fucking fire. And you're gonna right now spend more time getting your suit on than saving the person? Like, come on, let's go. That's why Saturn's at fall in Aries, just because there's always like that, you know the people too, right? But I can't at this moment, I need to get this together. Please. Anybody here with a strong Mars knows, or strong Aries, like, you should come, let's go. Right? And so there's this let's go moment here. But it's interesting, of course, because there's a glitch, and I'm going to show it in actual charts, but I just want to get to this extreme change moment here, because it's the reset button. Trust me, in life, I've done it many times since I built my first computer, after my Apple IIe when I was like 2 years old, like my first Amiga, and then my first 48060X 66 megahertz processor PC. I'm not much of a nerd. I pushed the reset button a lot. Especially with Windows. And we get that now about, antiviruses, because, Bill Gates loves to try and eradicate viruses and let people know. Just slip it into your wife's drink. So if we think about it, it's like, okay, so what's gonna happen here with Saturn Neptune at 0 Aries, which actually it's kind of interesting. It's not like the middle of the conjunctional astrology, it's the end. The next one is Saturn and Uranus, which meet in 6 years, right? And that's way ahead. 6 years, I mean, I'll be honest, last 6 years felt like an eternity, but it also felt like 1 minute, but that's only when you kind of get to the other side. If I were to tell you you had to do the last 6 years all over again, you'd be like, fuck no. No, I'm good. But so Saturn likes, of course, institutions, the government aspects of things. Of course, there's also a societal aspect. Saturn, believe it or not, a lot of people always think it's Aquarius stuff. Capricorn actually looks at things, society in a way. You know, your friends, your inner circle, those kind of things, and also kind of trends can be very Aquarian, but like capitalizing on society in itself and like defining society and its roles and like, it's very Capricorn, very Saturn. And with Neptune, there's things that need to dissolve. And one thing I like is the North Node is in Pisces, so the dispositor for Neptune is, of course, the North Node is dispositing Neptune. And even though it's in Aries, there's this North Node we have to follow, and it's still in Pisces. And so I think that the dissolving factor is stronger than ever. And if you think about Saturn having to go through Pluto conjunction, square to Uranus in 2021, like it's had to go through a lot, having to go through Pisces with Neptune the whole time. It didn't get any, you know, it was the ruler through Capricorn, it was the ruler through Aquarius. It had all this power, Jupiter, all this stuff, and then it was like, oh, Pisces, and not just Pisces, it likes Pisces, but oh, Neptune's there? Fuck. You have to remember that for a lot of the Neptune and Pisces cycle, there's actually something called hierarchy with dispositions. And Neptune sat at the top. That's what's hard about Neptune and Pisces, is like, you could just disposit planet after planet in the hierarchy and be like, oh, Neptune wins. But when Saturn was in Capricorn, there would be days where I'd be like, oh, look at Saturn's winning, beating Neptune right now. So it's almost kind of like there was a grudge of Saturn, like, oh God, Neptune's gonna win the whole time. But we're out of both. We get back to this kind of phase here where there is no outer planet that is in its home sign. So think about Pluto in Scorpio back in the 80s and the beginning of the 90s till about 94, 95, right? That was Pluto in its home sign, Scorpio. Then you gotta think about Neptune, we just did that, 2011 to 2025 and 26. Then, of course, Uranus and Aquarius, which we had all the way back at the end of the 90s into the 2000s. We've lived through all three outer planets in their domicile spots. That's over. That's an accomplishment on your own. You should give yourself a round of applause. Because, if you think about it, when we think about outer planets and mental health and all the things that are way beyond even our understanding, yeah, we have hit the fucking gold mine of like all that. And I think that's what this is about, is watching these things dissolve and watching what's going to come forward now. What I like about Aries is it always is about coming forward, right? It's not going to sit in the back and not say anything. It's going to show up. It's going to find a way to show up. It's going to, it might, you know, people think Aries are very confident. No, they are confident once they have looked at it enough to be like, yeah, I can do this. Okay, let's go. It's Leos that believe they're better than shit and then go, oh shit, I overshot the moon, hold on. It's not Aries. Aries is smart. Like, I'm not gonna do it unless I can really fucking do it. Like, Leo's like, oh, I can do that shit. Let me show you one. Oh shit, no, never mind. You know? Actually, Sag can be a little bit more. But I like that. But I think that what's cool about it is like, what is this all gonna look like? Of course, we can make assumptions. We can be like, oh, well, look at AI, and that's the revolution, and the Pluto and Aquarius thing. And that's definitely, I think, a lot of it. But I think when we think about climate right now, when we think about healthcare, when we think about all these different social crises that are happening that aren't being paid attention to, it's like, Aries isn't gonna allow us to just not pay attention to it anymore. What I love about Neptune and Aries is these sensitive issues, they unfortunately become aware and then almost fall to the back of Pisces. But in Aries, it's like, you know what? You guys are having slaves, and you guys are just like saying that's okay. That's not cool. That's not cool. Like, we're gonna have to do something about that. And when these big events are happening about our climate, because look at our climate, it is the worst that it could be. Like, look at the crazy storms we get. Look at whether you want to use geoengineering or whether we're also contributing to it. It's all of it. We're contributing no matter what. So there's geoengineering and there's the shit that we've done. I mean, I remember, I'm old enough to know that the fucking spray cans didn't do a good job with the fucking ozone. Right? This is forcing us to actually have to face now. What I love about Aries is you gotta face it. And if we're gonna resist these things, it's gonna go really bad. Try avoiding an Aries when you promised them that you were gonna do something. They'll show up at your house and be like, what, dude? and that's what Aries rules, is the head. And so these things are coming to a head. Which I like, but I think that the collective, is gonna have to not be afraid to face these things. And in your own life. What needs to come to a head is already, I'm sure right now in your life, already kind of poked out. It's like a little, I remember the first time I grew weed when I was like 12, like I put a little seed in a little fucking cup, right? And I fucking put some soil and I put it by my window, and when the first sprout of a little marijuana seed, you're like, ew. Oh wait, I don't want marijuana, fuck that shit. Anybody got a black light room or anything? I made a blacklight room in my closet and nobody knew. It was pretty cool. But then it was a male plant. I was like, fuck, dude. Like 3 months and it was a male plant. Oh my God, nobody wants a male plant. Trust me. I remember I threw that thing away, no problem. But I think that's the problem, is like, it's just sprouting right now. And I'm excited about this year because this transit is the transit that says, game on now. We can actually address all these issues over the last 6 years, and that really are the last 6,400 years. Now, I know a lot of them didn't come up for a while, but actually they did. I know I'm gonna get some people upset, but religion's one of them. Neptune. And more of like where the religion's kind of gone farther away. So I'm talking to the people who kind of go extremist. Neptune can get lost looking back to the sun. And if you were to be on Neptune and look over at the sun, it's so barely there. It's almost kind of like how a Pisces will see something and be like, it's not there. Even though they kind of know. But you're like, The problem though is that a lot of what's dictating the Saturn government's world is all religious based. I don't need to go into Israel, or I don't need to go into who's running America, or who's running all these other things right now, or what's happening in Iran, what's happening in Ukraine, what's that deal about? There's always a religious thing. Whether I want to look at Putin and he's like, no, we're not the West, because the Great Schism is actually in the beginning of the 1000s with a supernova that showed up right when the Catholic Church split from the Eastern Orthodox Church. Right? So you have Putin making it a religious war about, we don't have all these crazy non-Christian ideals, but Eastern Orthodox ideals. You have America using, Israel with their idea of these are chosen people and for that land and we need to protect them. And then you have the horrible situation in Iran where, we're going to kill everybody in order to keep our regime going because of our version of the religion. That, he's still got the blood of Muhammad in him. Does he have the semen rag too? We thought that joke. Guess they haven't studied Muhammad yet, but this is, and I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack, but this is the one problem to not get involved in. What I love about Saturn Neptune is it's not over, right? You have to spend the whole Saturn and Aries rest of this transit with Neptune and Aries. Right? That's the other thing that makes it so interesting about Saturn Neptune cycles, is that some of them you get it just in the sign, because Neptune can be in a sign for a long freaking time. But we got it as Neptune's leaving Pisces and ingressing into Aries. So the whole balsamic phase of the old transit, plus just being in there, and then you get the whole Saturn Neptune in freaking Aries. You get it again. We're going to spend a total of 5+ years with Saturn and Neptune in the same sign. So that means the universe is definitely wanting to bring these subconscious, spiritual things up to a head, into phase. And I think that the religious aspects can be a big part of it. You know, last time that we had Neptune in Aries, Pluto in Aquarius, that's when Henry VIII left the Catholic Church. That's when the Spanish took over the Incan Empire. One of them was crazy, some of those conquistadors. He took an Incan wife. It didn't go too well for him. They fucking found that dude and killed him. I was happy with the Incans that did that. But that's where you now see Mexico today, right? What happened in Mexico? That was the Aztecs. All of that is Neptune, Aries, Pluto, Aquarius. And there's always a religious element to it. Even the Neptune and Aries cycle prior, the Civil War, or before the Civil War, that was religious. I know people don't want to look at that, but General Lee, read his journal. It's like a fucking Bible. It's like Mike Huckabee. I'm not kidding. I don't know if you guys just saw the Tucker Carlson interview with them. Like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Really? I don't know what you're talking about. But these are going to be the things that come up. But believe it or not, whether it's corporations, whether it's our governments, like we have to, as people now, take this moment and go, what are we going to do to define things in this beautiful, more spiritual way? And in many ways, it's like, we can't be stuck in you're this and I'm that. Especially when it comes to these awesome transits that are coming this year. And that's where the finding the light, I think, is coming. Like, one beautiful thing about Saturn Neptune is there is a balance has to be found with any conjunction. With Saturn, like, okay, you can't be a control freak, but, you know, we like your structure. We like responsibility. With Neptune, yeah, you know what? Like, no, that person is not your twin flame, but I like the idea and the vision that you have about love and charity and being an empathetic person. Right, so we have to realize that this is a very awesome thing at the start of the beginning of the chart, and it's on every single person's draconic north node, which I'll give you the basics. It doesn't matter if you know how to do that. Your north node in the house it's in, it's still the same shit, just the Aries version of it. Like, go towards your north node. That's why you're here. So the passage through this is your north node is saying, this, okay, for me it's 10th house. It's like, fuck. I gotta still come out and tell people shit. Okay, fine. Trust me, it's really easy. I'm a dad now. I'm the south node in the 4th house. I'm in Sag. It's like, let's just go take a vacation with my kids and just get the fuck out of here. No, I'm sorry, David. That's not gonna happen. That's life. South node Libra in the draconic chart. That your way through this balancing act and to find the light is through your north node and using that draconic understanding. Now what I'm going to show here is the actual astrology, because I like to do that. So if we go to 1345 and we think about this conjunction that was happening, and we were in Capricorn back then into Aquarius, there's Mars. So in 1345, this astrologer just really starts to go, uh-oh, I'm seeing what I don't know if I really want to see it, but we'll see, and I'll be able to do a point for you guys on this right now. How crazy is that? I actually love looking at old charts. They kind of help make this a little bit better. There we go. So, what we're looking at is right here. That back in 1345, an astrologer starts to see this approach here of Mars, and I'm laughing because Mercury was with it. Definitely would have got his attention. But there's Jupiter and there's Saturn, and so Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and that comes from a lot of old conjunctional astrology. If those three meet, it's going down. But it's also the understanding, and they didn't know back then, or did they? I mean, I have some evidence. You look at some old Hermetic stuff, or even Robert Flood drew 3 realms outside of here in some of his great work. But, you know, there's Pluto and Uranus conjuncting too. No, they wouldn't have known that. But it's also, oh wow, there's going to be a Jupiter, Saturn, and Aquarius. Oh, okay, there's going to be a Jupiter, Neptune. We just went through all these. So that conjunction is what actually fired off and was the prediction that he gave 2 years. He told the Pope, 2 years, this shit's going to go down. And you would think that, well, during the transit, it should be it. And this is a good example about big transits, especially when it comes to conjunctions. It's not immediate. Like 2 days ago when the Saturn Neptune was happening, I remember I was sitting on the Saturn Pluto being like, oh, I get to go through a Saturn Pluto because I was born, you know, with Saturn and Pluto close by when I was born. Is it done?
Thank you.